Hello fellow Jerrycans. To no one's surprise, Game Freak announced we're getting DLC for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet in the holiday of 2023. Pokemon The Hidden Treasure of Area Zero is gonna be our major topic for this year. Thank the Lord we're not getting a rushed Butcher Gen 5 remake this year. Well, the trailer of the DLC was a bit underwhelming because they barely showed off any actual darn gameplay footage. I'll admit it can be good because I did enjoy Scarlet and Violet relatively. But should they have made DLC? After all, before Sword and Shield, Game Freak never made DLC. They created something called Third Games. A third game of Pokemon will basically another release of a game after the original two versions with added content, a definitive edition re-release. This started all the way back in the beginning in Gen 1 with Pokemon Yellow version, Special Pikachu edition, then Gen 2 with Crystal, then Emerald, then Platinum, then sort of Black and White 2, skipping Gen 6, RP Kalos, and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. But with Gen 8, Game Freak has ditched that model and has fully committed to making DLCs. So instead of a Pokemon insert joke about weapons here, we got the Isle of Armor and the Crown Tundra. Tundra? The topic of whether DLC or server versions are superior is a topic that frequently comes up in the Pokemon fandom. I think there is no clear answer to the debate on which one is better, but you're here to listen to my personal opinions. Well, get ready folks. Well, me personally.
I will be voting
Third versions. I prefer third versions of a DLC, and I would have liked it if they would have made a third version of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Why? Part 1. The case for third games. Pokemon Platinum. When Pokemon Yellow was made in 1998, it was just honestly a bit of a cash grab to exploit the success of late 90s Pokemania. Just change some of the Pokemon sprites, add the following Pikachu, add Jesse and James. The game is relatively still the exact same. Pokemon Crystal was a bit less cash grab, but still not much changed too. Just made the sprites animated, add an option to play as a girl, and add a subplot about Suicune and a weirdo man. It's fine. But starting with Pokemon Emerald, third games became more than just adding some little content. It became more about improving the game rather than just adding stuff. Third game's goal became these three words: expand, fix, and improve. And that is the main reason why I prefer third games over DLC. Third games can fix and improve things that DLC cannot. Yes, third games and DLC could expand on a game by adding content, and yes, there can be free or paid DLC that patches and fixes stuff in a video game, but there's a limit to how much one can fix through downloadable patches. Third games are good because they can fix things that didn't work in a game, and much better than DLC or patches. The best game to showcase this is Pokemon Diamond and Pearl and Platinum. Let's say Pokemon Diamond and Pearl came out in 2022, ironic, or Nintendo was able to distribute an update patch in 2006. Let's see what DLC could have fixed and not fixed. One of the biggest problems of Diamond and Pearl is of course the stuttering game engine. Forget Scarlet and Violet's framerate drops, Gen 4 DP is the most slow and stuttering Pokemon game that ever existed. I hate how there is this half-second delay after every action in battle, like I showcased before. I hate how mundane things like surfing on water are needlessly slower than your mom. Anyways, for these kind of things, a patch of DLC could have sufficed, and there was no reason to make Platinum if it was the only problem. Just edit the search speed a wee bit faster, change some of the coding so that text displays much quicker, its speed bars drop instantly. Hell, I'm pretty sure there are Game Shark codes that could accomplish that. But Diamond and Pearl's problems don't end at the slow game engine. No, there are much more big problems that in my mind couldn't have been fixed by DLC or patching, and things that ultimately warranted a Pokemon Platinum version. Let's talk about how Pokemon Platinum expanded, fixed, and improved Diamond and Pearl. First of all, the limited 151 dex. I asked a year and a half ago and I will ask again. Why was the Sinnoh Dex in DP so bad, small, and limited? Why was there 151 limit so that not every new Sinnoh Pokemon like Gallade and Rotom was not available to the player until the post-game? And NPCs like Flint were forced to use Pokemon that were not their type because there was not enough of their assigned type. I guess you can create a patch that changes their team and wild Pokemon distribution so it includes more Pokemon, but then it becomes a completely different game. So that's the question, how much can you change something in a game with a patch until it becomes a completely new game? A deluxe edition like Platinum? I would think changing something major like regional Pokédex, what wild Pokemon show up in game, and NPC team composition so their difficulty is completely different, is almost a new game, right? Food for thought. The story too. Cyrus in Diamond Pearl is a bad, terrible villain. We don't know his motivations for trying to create a new world. We only meet him like twice. He gets barely any development. The climax of him when you beat him in Spirit Pillar is a cop-out. He doesn't learn his lesson. Just says he'll be a good god one day and disappears.
Please clap.
What makes Pokemon Platinum so great and so worthwhile in my humble opinion is the development we got out of Cyrus. He gets way more screen time, we get memorable cutscenes of him like when he gives his speech, we see him get his ass kicked by Giratina to learn some humility, we also see him have a rage mental breakdown against the player to show that he's a liar that is not free of emotions, a hypocrite that tries to deny life's emotions. An incel if you really think about it. Knowledge, emotion, and willpower is what gives life meaning, and we should cherish those three things. That is the ultimate message of the Sinnoh games, and Pokemon Platinum got that message delivered across to us when DP failed. I also want to emphasize it wasn't just Cyrus who got more development. I said it again and will say again. When you say you love the Sinnoh games, you mean you love Platinum only, because everything you love about Sinnoh is from Platinum. Barry's a boring farce and he's much more interesting in Platinum with additional cutscenes like him skirt chasing Crasher Wake. Cynthia's a boring careless bitch in DP. The Cynthia you and I know that helps the player be intellectual and care about Sinnoh's history is from Platinum, not DP. Not just the characters, most of your favorite Sinnoh Pokemon are from Platinum and are not in DP. Imagine not being able to use Magnezone, Glaceon, or Mamoswine in a Sinnoh game, right? But back to the point. Would that have been possible with a Pokemon Diamond and Pearl DLC in the style of Gen 8 or 9 instead of Platinum? No, not really. I guess we could have gotten a DLC post-game content that continued Cyrus' story after Spirit Pillar, but that to me is fixing the problem when it's too late. The events in the main game is what fucking matters to me, and are the things that should be fixed, not added. Part 2. Sword and Shield DLC Debacle. I guess you could say the main reason why I don't like DLC is that DLC really doesn't affect the main campaign much. I mean, Sword and Shield DLC, and frankly I'm predicting Scarlet and Violet DLC will be this too, is just explore a new area with new characters. Yeah, it could be good, but I see more as a separate bonus thing. Sword games expand, fix, and improve, but DLC only expand. Despite what you may think, I think Sword and Shield's main campaign story had a lot of potential. It could have been good. Let's say instead we got a third game instead of DLC for Gen 8. They could have improved and expanded Rose's story so he's a more compelling villain, redesigned most of the map in Galar so it's less boring and linear, add in cutscenes that are obviously missing due to being rushed like Dynamax Pokemon going berserk and creating havoc, changing gym leaders' teams so they're less easier than Kalos gym leaders, and make it possible to complete the national dex by, you know, porting every model over from Gen 7. But no, we got DLC instead. 2 new separate crets on different lands that are completely separated from Galar. It could almost be completely new different games. Nothing's changed in the main story. DLC just expands, but doesn't fix and improve, and Galar still remains broken. However, one thing that I repeatedly hear about the strengths of DLC is that you can keep your progress and continue on to more expanded content. That's actually the exact excuse Junichi Masuda and Shigeru Mori said in the DLC announcement video in 2020. You can keep using the same Pokemon you caught in Sword and Shield's main campaign.
Until now, we've sometimes released new titles set in the same region as previous games, such as Pokemon Platinum version or Pokemon Ultra Sun and Pokemon Ultra Moon. This expansion pass will be different from those games. You'll be able to set out on new adventures using the save data you're already playing with.
I really don't have anything to say to refute that. It's a nice merit that DLC has that Sword games don't. But if a Sword game makes a lot of improvements and changes with enough fixes and new content that it's worth playing the same game again, I wouldn't mind starting my progress again. Certain games need not just expand, fix, and improve, but certain games also need to be different enough so that it can merit another run. Part 3. Base game should be good enough already. Now, one of the biggest arguments against certain games that I often hear is this: the Pokemon base game should be good enough so it doesn't need a third game. I will say that is a valid argument. After all, if you look at it from a business perspective, they're selling the same games twice or thrice if you get double packs. Also, I think Pokemon X and Y is probably the game that feels like it was developed with this mindset the most. They knew they had to get this game out by 2013, so they were like, it's not finished? We'll complete it in Pokemon Z. Rush X and Y out. Why does Lysandre want to destroy the universe? We'll explain it in Z. Why do only Kanto starters get Mega and not Kalos starters? We'll give it in Z. Why is there no Southern Kalos? We'll add it in Z. Well, we never got a Pokemon Z and Kalos got the short end of the stick.
No! This is not how this was supposed to go!
Anyways, back to the point. So, are third games a scam just to sell the same game twice? It depends on how you look at things. Look, I don't mind buying the same game twice as long as I know the changes are good enough and I know I'll be getting a really good game. Remember in my Pokemon tier list, 3 out of 4 of my favorite games are third games? Also, even if the base game is good, I think any video game they could make a deluxe edition out of. No game is perfect, anything can be expanded, fixed, and improved. Even the most well-made base games, Pokemon Black and White, if they made a Pokemon Gray instead of a Pokemon Black and White 2, I think they still could have made substantial changes. Such changes include adding more areas so Unova is less linear, make Pokemon distribution better and expand the 151 decks, fix the goddamn post-game level scaling, add more character development of Van and Guesses, make the first 5 hours of the game of the Castilla less fucking boring, and the list goes on. For the story, Pokemon Black and White had a compelling enough plot, I guess, but there was some lingering threads like the Fall Dragon that existed before Zekrom and Reshiram. Maybe they could have expanded upon that story for Pokemon Gray. And finally, they could have also added all the new content from the real Black and White 2, like Pokemon World Tournament and Pokestar Studios into Pokemon Gray 2. No matter how good a game is, some things might not work, and developers could see the feedback from the gamers and change things while not disturbing the whole big picture. I think this is the same reason why, unlike movies, video game re-releases, remasters, remakes are really common. We like our games getting updated and improved. We like it when they expand, fix, and improve games. Video games are interactive, non-linear media, and our interaction can be updated. I also want to remind people that it's not just Pokemon doing deluxe editions. I know other franchises, especially JRPGs, often release deluxe editions of games, so it's not Pokemon being money hungry than other game devs. But remember what I said, I don't mind buying the same game twice as long as there's enough improvement and changes. If they don't do that, I will agree that certain games are a scam. Speaking of a scam without not enough changes... Part 4. The case against third games, Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Here's the thing, yes I prefer third games over DLC, but I don't think they should make third games anymore. They should just stick to DLC. It's a matter of my expectations and reality. At least DLC can't really ruin the base game by just adding some optional content. What do I mean by that? Well, after Pokemon Ultra Shit and Ultra Piss, I've lost all faith in Game Freak's ability to make a good third game that expands, fixes, and improves. After Gen 7, screw third games. I've done almost a full hour long rant about this game, but in summary, first, they could have either made a Pokemon Sun and Moon 2 where they continued Lilia and Luzanme's family story like the Gen 5 games did, or made a Pokemon Eclipse so that it fixed all the bad parts of Sun and Moon, but they chose neither. Second, Pokemon's Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon is such a lame, lazy, and boring name compared to Pokemon Eclipse, and they were greedy by releasing 2 third games. We barely got any fixing and improving in USRM. Nothing's barely expanded, fixed, or improved. Same still bad, overly long cutscenes everywhere, too much hand-holding, still incomplete island trials with NPCs that were obviously meant to be captains, still not being captains. Instead, the only expansion we got were useless or annoying features like Character Assassination Kanto Nostalgia post-game, Pikachu Kanto Nostalgia, Kanto Nostalgia, Cantonian Nostalgia, and reliving the experience of escaping Lex Luthor's ring maze in Superman 64 that's not Kanto Nostalgia. Some parts of the game are actually worse, such as villain Luzanime's arc being completely butchered and hijacked by Ultra Necrozma. That is why I hate Gireum so much, because they ruined Sun and Moon's potential to be good. If you think about it, most of the new stuff in Gireum could have been DLC. Think about it. Rainbow Rock episode is separate from the main story, so DLC. Visiting Ultra Megalopolis could have been a DLC story. Surfing could have been a free fucking update. Catching legendaries and Ultra Glory Hills could have been DLC. Nintendo 3DS had a eShop and supported DLC. Other games like Super Smash Bros. 3DS did DLC. So why didn't Pokemon? Did they really need to make 2 more games to milk the dying 3DS? Assholes. Anyways, the point is, if this was old Game Freak, I would be championing them making a deluxe star game instead of DLC. But considering the reality that is Game Freak's lazy, incompetent rushing and cutting corners, they should just stick to DLC. Part 5. Let's say Scarlet and Violet got third games. I'll finish off the video with my thoughts on the latest Pokemon games, Scarlet and Violet. Going back to the beginning, should Scarlet and Violet have gotten third games? Well, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is an interesting game that has left much to be desired. I've done a full review of this game, so if you missed it, but despite the obvious rush and finish the game is, I didn't hate the game. I thought there was a good game hidden in there, somewhere in that mountain of glitches and incompleteness, because I did like the open world aspect, the story and characters are pretty enjoyable, and just going around the overworld dicking around Paldea was pretty fun. You may disagree with me, and I will see why frankly, but I think there is a foundation for a good Pokemon game in Generation 9 Pokemon. If they made a third Pokemon game for Paldea, here's some ideas on what could I have expanded, fixed, and improved. First and obviously, fix the game so it doesn't stutter, and there's no glitches that makes the game look like it was patented by Todd Howard. Second, another major problem of the game is that all townhouses have barely any interiors, so add that back. While doing that, include some NPC side quests so the world is more lively. Third, add a level scaling algorithm to gym leaders and bosses because the difficulty curve in the game is a mess. I've already talked a great deal about this previously. Fourth, out of the 3 storylines in the game, I thought the Team Star storyline was the weakest because we never got to see these guys interact with students and get bullied, and they just talk about it. So improve and expand on your storyline. Fifth, Spain is surrounded by Balearic and Canary Islands, so add those places to the game. Lastly, previous Sword games expanded on Sword legendaries like Rayquaza, Giratina, and Gireum. They were the head front of new content that brought new gimmicks, areas, and storylines, so do the same by creating a Sword legendary for Koraidon and Miraidon. The possibilities and ideas to fix, expand, and improve Paldea are enough to warrant a new game in my humble opinion. But then again, reality check. I don't want them to make a Sword game after USM. They'll just make Pokemon Ultra Scarlet and Ultra Violet. Just add lazy rush stuff like, I don't know, Rainbow Rock Episode 2 Electric Boogaloo starring Team Yell and Team Star. Pokemon Trader Red coming to the academy as exchange student for lazy fan service because he's from Kanto, the greatest region ever. Ruin Arven and his parents' story somehow by making Arven the evil mastermind or some stupid shit. Have every legendary show up but only catchable through terror raids. And sell that for $70 each since other cooler franchises are doing it now too. Instead, we're getting Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, the hidden treasure of Area Zero, and I think this will be better than Pokemon Ultra Violation of My Consensual Rights. Based on the trailer, I think the game suddenly taking place in a traditional Japanese environment like Johto is completely out of left field, and the decision to have a game where object physics are glitchy as hell take place in a marine water environment is questionable, but I will admit that it looks interesting. So I guess we'll have to see if it's good or not, and I guess I'm just glad we're not getting another fucking installment in 2023. Anyways, my conclusion to this whole debate of Sword games versus DLC is this: it's up to preference. Personally, I think Sword games are good because they expand, fix, and improve Pokemon games, but I could see why people would call it a scam. And even then, I think Game Freak lost the ability to properly expand, fix, and improve games, so DLC is a better choice because at least it won't be a scam. But what are your thoughts? Put your comments down below, whether you prefer DLC or Sword games and your reasoning. I'd love to hear everyone's general consensus on this. Maybe the real Sword game, treasure, was the friends we made along the way.